Howdy everybody, welcome back to Accounting 1101 where we are talking about internal controls. In our last video we talked about a definition for internal controls. In our video right now we're going to talk a little bit about what are the components of an internal control system and how we get all of that set up. So our goal for the video, after you're done looking at the video and doing the reading, you should be able to describe the element of internal control system. And you should also understand the inherent limitations of an internal control system. So let's get right to it. There are 5 elements to an internal control system, and we're going to go through each one of them. There's a control environment. We do a risk assessment. There are the actual control procedures, the policies and procedures that we've implemented. And then there's a monitoring element and an info and communication element. Those 5 elements make up our internal control system. And again, our internal controls are designed to reasonably assure reliability, efficiency, and compliance. And that's kind of what's in the middle there. So let's break them down one by one. First of all, your book has a really great graphic. I love the little graphic they have that shows you the internal control system in action here. Look at the dark sky. There's lightning. It's raining. These are all the threats that are waiting to just sink their teeth into your business, right? Well, our little control umbrella is going to keep us safe. And you can see our control umbrella is made up of the control environment, the procedures, the risk assessment, the monitoring, and it's keeping management and business dry from all of those threats just bouncing right off of our control system there. And there's also the information and communication element. Notice that it's kind of running down here, informing the management and business as to what's going on in the control system. So you can kind of visualize internal controls that way. Isn't that great? I keep that graphic on every slide just to hope that it hammers home for you. What about that control environment? The control environment is kind of the environment that our controls are living in. And that control environment consists of the overall attitude of management and employees about the importance of internal controls. And so a good control environment might have a code of ethics that people are trained on, that they follow. A good control environment would be management who follows the controls themselves and kind of demonstrates the importance of the controls. And so management philosophy and their style is a factor of the control environment. As I like to say, the crap flows downhill. If you have bad management and they don't put an importance to internal controls in a control environment, that all flows through the organization. If management doesn't follow controls, if management doesn't pay attention to it, then no one else will. So that's a very important part of the control environment, the management philosophy and their style. The organizational structure, the lines of decision making are important in the control environment. And you don't want to have an organizational structure in which people don't know what they're doing and who's responsible for what. And then finally, the personnel policies. Are the policies set up to hire good people and train good people and retain good people? We've got to have personnel policies that do that. All of that is part of the control environment. Without a good control environment, we can't expect to have strong internal controls. And I bet if we were doing a live class right now and we could talk about control environment, I bet you've all worked in situations that were not good as far as the control environment. Maybe bad management, maybe bad personnel policies. Maybe you work somewhere where there's a lot of nepotism. People just hire their kids and their cousins and gave them positions of responsibility and they weren't responsible. So all of that goes into the control environment. Risk assessment is also a part of that element of internal control, part of the internal control system. In risk assessment, management talks about identifying all the possibilities of bad things that could happen. We're looking at the risks involved to our business, how likely they are to occur, and also steps we can take to mitigate the risk that we come up with. And so you go back to the Moho Bob bar and grill example that we talked about when we were talking about the definition of internal control in that video. What kind of risk do you think you might encounter in the restaurant business. I mean, just think about that for a second. You've all dined out. I'll bet a lot of you probably worked in restaurants too. What kind of risks are there that we would need to plan for? Maybe need to plan for a way to keep employees from stealing money out of the till, out of the register. We need to plan internal controls around our inventory. Not only so people aren't stealing the inventory, but also people aren't wasting it. And that could be a risk, people wasting inventory. We may also need to figure out a way to keep customers from doing a dine and dash. You ever been in a restaurant, you'll notice the cash register is almost always near the front door. And catch people coming out before they pay, right? So we're thinking about the risks involved in the business and how we might be able to mitigate them before they become a problem. And control procedures are the actual policies and procedures that we enact. Our training policies, what are the supervision policies we have, rotating duties among the employees, forcing accounting staff to take mandatory vacations. You may have heard people say, oh, such a hard worker, they never take a vacation. In the accounting world, that's a big no-no. We want our accountants to take vacations because that can sometimes uncover fraud. People that are committing fraud, maybe stealing money and trying to cover it up, they don't want to take vacation. They don't want somebody to see what they're doing and get into their desk and get in their computer and get into their stuff. They want to be there to answer the phone when a question comes in. As you can cover. So mandatory vacations, separation of duties, a big internal control procedure. We want to have good separation of duties. In the accounting world, that means we always want to avoid a situation where someone with accounting ability doesn't have custody of assets. I don't want the person doing my journal entries in the accounting system to be able to handle cash and inventory. It's too easy for them to take stuff and then cover it up. So we build a wall, separation of duties. We separate custody of assets, custody of cash, custody of inventory, away from people who are doing the actual accounting. Simple separation of duties. We also have procedures for proofs and approvals. Maybe we have a rule where we have to have two people sign a check before it can be cashed. Maybe there's an approval process before money can be spent, has to be signed off on by people. All that stuff, policies and procedures, that basically where the rubber meets the road of internal controls. What about monitoring? We got a system in place, we got to monitor it to make sure it works. And that's the monitoring component here of our internal control system. We monitor the employee behavior, we monitor the accounting system for any signs of problems. And so what kind of warning signs do you think we might be looking for when we talk about our employees? What kind of warning signs might they be showing? Hey, something might be going on here. Monitoring. Warning signs with regards to people. An abrupt change in lifestyle. Okay, so I'm living a pretty low-key life here at my salary level, but all of a sudden I start spending money like crazy. I got a brand new Tesla out in the driveway. I took 3 vacations this year. I ditched my Fitbit and now I'm wearing a Rolex. So there's an abrupt change in lifestyle without winning the lottery. Haven't hit Powerball. It's a sudden change there. Close social relationships with a supplier, refusing to take vacation, frequent borrowing from other employees, and then finally excessive use of alcohol and drugs. All of those could be a red flag for an employee. And they might set people, okay, there might be something going on here. Especially if these employees work in accounting or in handling any kind of cash or inventory. And the funny thing is, if you're a fan of The Office, almost every one of those apply to Meredith. You remember Meredith? The steak deal that she had with a vendor, number 2 there. So those are warning signs we'd look out for with people. What about the accounting system itself? Warning signs from the accounting system. Again, this is part of that monitoring component of the internal control system. Missing documents or gaps in the transaction numbers. Maybe we have our checks in a numerical sequence and there's a series of checks missing or unaccounted for. Same with invoices. Maybe we have invoices we're sending out and there are invoices missing. Unusual increase in customer refunds. Think about that from the restaurant standpoint. If all of a sudden we have a bunch of customer refunds getting comped on meals, it might be some shady stuff going on there. Differences between daily cash receipts and what's going into the bank deposit might mean that someone's pocketing money before the money goes to the bank. Sudden increase in slow payments. Maybe we have customers that are paying on credit, account receivable, and that has slowed down. People aren't paying as quickly. Could be some issue going on there. So all kinds of warnings that we could get from the accounting system itself. Info and communications, internal control systems are living systems. We never set them up and then just say, okay, we're done forever. We're always monitoring the system. We're always getting information from that system and learning about it and learning things we need to tweak and improve, or where problems might lie, risks that pop up that we didn't see before. Kind of like a whack-a-mole game. Oh gosh, we didn't think about this before. We need to implement a policy or procedure to deal with it. That's all coming from information and communication. The information is communicated among the employees from the internal control system. So, your 5 elements of internal control. You need to be able to identify all of the 5 elements and discuss and provide an example of every element. Okay? That's your goal from our video here in the reading. Limitations of internal control. It all sounds well and good, but the reality is there is no perfect internal control system. Okay? Internal control systems only provide reasonable assurance. And they're a safeguard, but they're not a complete, perfect safeguard. There's a human element involved. I mentioned in the video before, where we talked about the definition of internal control. This is a system designed by humans, and humans are working in it. Humans have their own biases, their own kind of things they like to do, their own temptations maybe. And sometimes humans will find a way to exploit internal controls, no matter how good they are. So that human element is always going to keep internal controls from being 100% perfect safeguard. There's also a cost benefit. Is maybe if I have that Moho Bob's Bar and Grill, I got one location. Technically, I could stand there all day long, every minute we were open, and look over the shoulders of people. And maybe clone myself 3 or 4 times so I can have those clones go around. That's going to be really expensive, right? I could set a camera up over the register, and I could have that camera pointed there, and I could hire somebody to watch that camera 12 hours a day. Well, at some point, the cost of doing those items is going to exceed the benefit. Okay? And so that's another limitation of internal control. We could design the crazy controls that will give us 100% security and peace of mind, but the cost is going to be so exorbitant, it's not going to be worth it. So those are 2 limitations of internal control that you need to be aware of. What we're going to look at in our next video, we're going to take what we know about internal controls and apply it to cash. Cash payments going out the door, cash payments coming in the door. Cash is a very highly sought after item, right? Everybody wants money. So we have to make sure that our internal controls surrounding cash are really strong, because we don't want our money to walk out the door. We'll talk about that in our next video. We'll see you there.